How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. This is Mike. Welcome back to another movie log. And this is going to begin, let's see, what I watched starting on April 5th, going up to just a couple of nights ago. Now, I intended to do these movie logs every week, and it seems to be turning into every 2 weeks. So I didn't mean for that to happen, but maybe that's better. That way I can cover more ground and make less videos. So we'll see what happens here. Now, during this period, there were only, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 6 movies that I watched for the first time. Everything else was a rewatch. So let me start out with 2 films that I picked up at Dollar Tree back when Dollar Tree was still open. I think all the Dollar Trees are closed because of the coronavirus epidemic. Maybe I actually haven't been out there to see, but I picked up a couple of films. And you know, a lot of these things at Dollar Tree, they really are worth $1. You put them in, you start watching them, and you realize, God, this is really terrible. And a lot of things that I've picked up, started to watch, I take them out and I don't finish them. But I did watch these 2. These were actually very good. I was quite surprised. The first one is called Natural Selection, and it's only a few years old. None of the actors I've ever heard of, except for Anthony Michael Hall, who is in this, all grown up, not anything like the nerdy kid from the Breakfast Club. He plays a security guard in a high school. This is about a couple of kids in high school who get into some very strange areas of life. A young boy, about 15 years old, moves to a new apartment, a new city, with his single mother, and you can tell there's a little bit of tension between the boy and his mother. That doesn't get explained until later in the film, but the kid enters a new high school and tries to make friends, starts getting close to this other kid who seems to be a very nice kid, first of all, to begin with, but we find out that there's a very dark side to this kid. So it gets into some really good stuff about what it's like to grow up in this day and age, conflicts with parents. Very surprising film. I would like to recommend this highly. If you happen to go to Big Lots and you see this, pick it up. The next one I watched, this is something called 10 by 10, which I had never heard of. Stars Luke Evans and Kelly Riley. It's a film that moves very quickly. I was quite surprised at how good this was. A man, played by Luke Evans, kidnaps a young woman. We have no idea why he's kidnapping her. Takes her out to this house way out in the middle of nowhere. And he has this padded room that's all set up. That's it looks like a cell, but it's got padded walls. And we find out why he kidnapped her. There is a connection there, and there's a twist upon twist upon twist. Does not go where you think it's going to go. The woman is anything but a helpless victim. She looks like she is at first, but actually very surprising and very well done. Now, another film that I watched for the first time was Alien 3, which, of course, is in this nice little compilation that I picked up at Big Lots, has the first 4 Alien films. Now, I watched this because my grumpy old gentleman, we all watched the same movie every month, and the one that was chosen this month was Alien 3, which I had never seen. And, of course, I loved Alien and Aliens, still have not seen anything beyond, I did see Prometheus. Yeah, of course, that came quite a bit later. I loved Alien, I loved Aliens, and Alien 3, not so much. But I did get through it. It has some interesting points to it, but I don't know. I guess you really have to love everything about Alien in order to love that film, and I just didn't. But I know a lot of people love this franchise and everything about it. So another film I watched for the first time, it's a film called Shall We Dance, starring, who are these people? Richard Gere, Jennifer Lopez, and Susan Sarandon. About a man in Chicago who is happily married, has a teenage daughter, and is something missing from his life. He's not really quite sure what it is, but he and his wife are kind of getting distant with each other, but they still love each other very much. He goes home on the L every night, and he looks up at this building that it's a dance studio, big sign for a dance studio, and there's a woman looking out of the window every night and just staring straight ahead. It's Jennifer Lopez, and he gets very intrigued by this woman, and he decides to go start taking dance lessons. Well, the movie doesn't take you where you think it's going to go. You think there's going to be a big hot affair between these two people, and that doesn't happen. But the guy he starts to come alive when he starts to dance. And he gets with this very kind of a mixed group of people, different personalities and all that. And it's really interesting. And it's done very well by Richard Gere. Of course, he's a good dancer anyway, as we saw in Chicago. Susan Sarandon is very good. Jennifer Lopez is terrific. Very good actress, actually. She surprises me. Another film that I watched for the first time just a couple of nights ago, it's been sitting on the shelf for a while, Reservation Road, starring Joaquin Phoenix, Mark Ruffalo, Jennifer Connelly, and Mira Sorvino, all about these two families that come together for the most sad reason possible. Joaquin Phoenix one night is out driving with his wife and two children, Jennifer Connelly and their two children, and they stop at a gas station, and the little boy gets out of the car and is close to the road, and nobody's watching him, and he gets hit by a car. Mark Ruffalo is the guy who hit him, and he stops, but then he drives on, so it's a hit and run. And it gets very involved because Joaquin Phoenix is trying to find out who the man was or the person was that hit his little boy, and he ends up hiring a lawyer who happens to be Mark Ruffalo, the guy who hit him. And it's very emotional and very well done by all these terrific actors. Very good film. Okay, now the last film that I watched for the first time, Royal Wedding, starring Fred Astaire, Jane Powell, Peter Lawford, and Sarah Churchill, who happens to be the daughter of Winston Churchill. The film was made in England. Well, it takes place in England, and it's supposed to be taking place at the time when Princess Elizabeth was marrying Philip Mountbatten. And so it's a very good little film, MGM musical, not one of the best MGM musicals, but it's not bad. The reason why I watched this is because my friends and I, on the Grumpy Old Gentleman, we were all watching films from the year 1951. We were doing top 10, and I chose this as one of them. The other films, a couple of things that I rewatched here for that purpose, because they were all released in 1951. I watched this kind of obscure Bette Davis film called Another Man's Poison. It's a murder mystery that was made in England, and this is the first film that Bette Davis made after All About Eve, that great triumph in All About Eve. And she also co-stars with Gary Merrill, who was with her in All About Eve, and by this time they were married. So that's kind of an interesting little development. Not a great film, but not bad. Bette Davis chews the scenery like no one else in the world ever has, which is kind of cool. Also from 1951, I rewatched these two terrific film noirs from that year. One is called The Racquet, starring Robert Mitchum, Elizabeth Scott, Robert Ryan, three great actors in a remake of a film that was made back in 1928. Terrific movie. And also very good, but very different. Robert Mitchum and Jane Russell in His Kind of Woman, directed by John Farrow. Also starring Vincent Price, Charles McGraw, Tim Holt. Marjorie Reynolds is in it, and Jim Backus. A very convoluted story, which I think would make a very good companion to The Big Sleep, as far as a movie that is super enjoyable to watch if you just don't try to follow the story all that much. But Mitchum and Russell are very good together, and they had great chemistry, and they became the best of friends in real life. Now, here are the movies that I rewatched. I'll do these very quickly. Comfort food, cinematic comfort food, since we're all under a lot of pressure now. So I'm watching a lot of things that I remember that just kind of calm me down. This is one of the Walt Disney serials from the Mickey Mouse Club back in 1958, starring Annette Funicello as Annette, a young girl who comes to the big city to live with her relatives and tries to get a new start and get accepted by the kids. It's all very 1950s sort of restrained teenage activity, and I've been told recently that I'm trying to relive my lost youth, and yeah, you're right, I am, and it's working. So here's a movie called Colossus, The Foreman Project, starring Eric Braeden and Susan Clark, and in the 70s. I haven't watched this in quite a number of years. It's all about a supercomputer that decides to take over the universe, and I was surprised at how well this holds up, and it's very prescient, and I think it's something we all need to rewatch. This is a very good film. This is a movie called Harold and Maude, Ruth Gordon and Bud Cort in a film that I started watching back in the 70s, maybe once a year. It would come back. It was a cult film, and it was just magic. And some of the magic is still there, not maybe as much as it was when I used to watch it when I was in my 20s. But yeah, it's still a very beautiful film. These two were terrific together. Ruth Gordon is fantastic. I also rewatched Ghost World. I've watched this many times. This is every bit as good and as important and as moving as the first time I saw it. It's very funny, but it's also has a lot to say about, well, the world we live in and teenage life, I guess. It's been a long time since I was a teenager. Very good. Thora Birch, Scarlett Johansson, and Steve Buscemi. Or do you say Buscemi? I don't know how it's pronounced. I rewatched a film that I seem to remember was very funny back when I first saw it. My Blue Heaven with Rick Moranis and Steve Martin, and it wasn't funny at all. I was surprised that it was one of the most unfunny Steve Martin films I had ever seen. I also rewatched this old science fiction Roger Corman low-budget classic, The Wasp Woman from 1960. And the reason why I watched this, I was giving a response on one of my YouTube friends, Blu-ray Frank. We were talking about he had watched The Blob, and I said, okay, now you're starting on the right track. Soon you'll be watching things like The Wasp Woman and Attack of the Giant Leeches. And it just made me think I hadn't seen this in years, and maybe I better know what I'm talking about before I start telling other people to watch these movies. It's cool. It's not a great film, but then a lot of these Roger Corman science fiction classics that were made for $25 weren't terrific films, but great fun to watch. So yeah. Woman turns into a wasp. Good idea. Finally, I rewatched a film I had not seen since the 1980s, About Last Night, starring Rob Lowe, Demi Moore, James Belushi, and Elizabeth Perkins, all about a couple of 20-somethings who were caught up in the Chicago singles bar culture back in the 80s and the one-night stands and all this stuff, and they decide to move in together just because they want to have sex, and then they start having all this conflict. Are we in a relationship? Are we really not? Are we in love? What's going on? And I don't know. I didn't enjoy it as much as I did back in 1986, but it was still a nice little time capsule and good music backing it up from the 80s. I wrote a very snarky review of this, which I think is kind of funny. I put it on my blog, so if I remember, I'll put a link down there and you can read it. But anyway, so that's what I watched during all this time. 12 minutes. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to go on that long. Comments are welcome. Talk to you later.